All right, we now have a special guest joining us on the podcast, Pete Nakos from On3. He's On3's sports business and transfer portal reporter, but really so much more, probably, Pete, chasing down scoops. I think he's chasing down an Oklahoma scoop right now, so stay tuned for Oklahoma fans following us. But you can follow Pete on Twitter /X at Pete Nakos _ it's just Pete Nakos _ right?
Yeah,
so
you got it, man.
Yeah, so Pete, obviously bringing the scoops. Turn on the notifications because there are a lot of scoops coming from there. But Pete, great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me on, guys. Happy Thursday.
Absolutely. AB's got a question to start us off.
Oh,
yeah, we'll get it going here. I guess we'll start with this, Pete. I mean, there were a ton of people saying when the spring portal opened that it was going to be chaos, that there would be this giant shift, among some of these teams that are maybe duking it out for title contention this year. I mean, what did we miss when making those types of predictions? Because really, it's been kind of middling in terms of the contributors that are going elsewhere.
So I personally never thought it was going to be nuts. Now, all that said, this is a Michigan podcast, and let's be upfront. I think a lot of people thought like Alabama and Michigan were going to have some more portal entries than they've had. And I think that was a lot of assumptions that maybe wasn't the most well thought out, but there was definitely some assumptions like, hey, new head coaches, athletes didn't really have a great opportunity when Harbaugh and Saban left. Maybe this gives them the chance. But obviously, Alabama and Sherrone Moore have done a fantastic job at roster retention. And that's a slew of things, right? Building a culture right away that athletes want to be a part of, having an NIL program in place that's attractive enough, things like that. But I definitely think that like the Michigans and the Alabamas and even Washington's had a little bit more than the other two. But I mean, a slew of schools have done a really good job of keeping talent together.
Do you think this is the way it's going to go? Like December is going to be when the best players jump in. December is going to be when schools, even if they're in a bowl game, or it might even be teams that are now in the 12-team playoff, but they're dedicating a lot of time and resources towards reeling those types of players in. And then April's kind of cleaning house, getting to the scholarship number. That's something that maybe people don't want to talk as much about. Like they got to get numbers down as well at different points. And then maybe the guys that are jumping in, and obviously there'll be exceptions, but are more the guys that didn't like where they were at the end of spring on the depth chart.
Yeah, I mean, I want to tell you that it's always going to be like this, but I'm also hesitant because as we all saw this week, like revenue sharing could be not imminent, but it's coming. But in this current model, like, yes, I think the spring is always going to be the time to offload players for depth guys to look for more playing time. And then obviously a lot of the guys we've seen gone in are FCS and group of 5 guys who are trying to climb the ranks and get to a bigger spotlight to perform. And then you hit the nail on the head a little bit right there, Clayton. I think a lot of programs are using the portal to make sure that they're at the 85-man scholarship. And as we've seen play out this week on social media, whenever we go on X, Deion Sanders in Colorado are controlling the narrative. But they've definitely in the last 18 months like cut players and stuff. And I guess that's the norm nowadays, right? Just kind of where we're at right now in college football.
Well, if the player's mid, then maybe you want to cut them. But obviously, yeah, that's been crazy at Colorado. I guess in terms of the player retention piece, like we all talk about NIL when it's an inducement for guys in the transfer portal, maybe tampering or whatever. But and I think Shannon Terry, the founder of On3, has tweeted about this. Like NIL actually has maybe worked in reverse in this spring transfer portal period because the collectives at the respective schools have been able to sign players to contracts, compensate them enough to where they're happy to stay where they're at. Is that the case? And how has Michigan done? You touched on it a little bit with the coaching change aspect of it, where Michigan did a good job. I think they've lost like maybe 10 guys, I think 10 or 11 since Jim Harbaugh left, but none of them have started a game, that sort of thing. Couple were in contention or Keon Sabb maybe started one game. Couple were in contention to be in the 2 deep, but Michigan's collective, has done a pretty good job. Maybe not on the recruiting side, not blaming them, but in terms of how the coaching staff wants to operate. But in terms of retention, it feels like they've done a good job of keeping guys in-house.
I would agree with that. Keon Sabb was probably the biggest surprise for me, obviously, and then Wednesday night, Amorion Walker announces he's coming back to Michigan from Ole Miss. So no, I think Michigan's done a really good job in roster retention, and I know that Chris Bowles, who's done a great job, obviously at the Wolverine, really does a good job of kind of keeping up to date with NIL and how that impacts the roster management. But Michigan's done a good job, and you're right that maybe it isn't exactly where some fans want it to be when it comes to recruiting high school talent, but it's obviously done the job that it needed to do to keep this roster together to have a chance to compete for a Big Ten title yet again. And you look at that defense, and you guys know it better than me, but like there could have been like some huge losses there, and that didn't happen, and that's probably a big reason why Michigan's gonna be at the top of the Big Ten again this year.
Well, Pete, you've been tracking both the football and basketball portals, and obviously, the roster construction is extremely different given, 85 scholarships versus 13. But just in general, when you look at, these transfer portal recruitments or inducements or whatever it is about the process in those two sports, what do you see as the biggest difference in how the portal has affected college basketball as opposed to college football?
It's funny. Football has the biggest payroll, right, by far, but the per player average is so much larger in basketball, right? Like Arkansas is going to commit like $6 million a year, give or take, to John Calipari. Like that is a ton of money for basketball. Some of these top players are getting like $1 million to $1.5 million in the basketball portal, and then you look at the football portal. I feel pretty confident in telling you that like there's maybe only a couple of guys right now who are going to get 7 figures. Part of that's because this football portal is just not as deep as December was. But I think that kind of gives you an idea, though, of like the per player average is so much higher in basketball when it comes to NIL.
Speaking of that, and going back to football specifically, I guess like we all know quarterbacks in the portal. I think there was a rumor, even Matt Rule might have come out and said it, that like top quarterbacks are $1.5 to $2 million a year, or at least that first year when you have to reel them in from the portal. When you look at NFL contracts, it's like quarterback, left tackle, edge rusher. Like a lot of those positions are kind of the guys that are getting paid the most, because you either have to pass the football, you have to protect the guy who's passing the football, and you have to rush and sack the guy who's passing the football. But what positions in college football outside of quarterback are commanding the most money? Because we've seen Michigan, they've gotten a couple wide receiver transfers, one of them being Amorion Walker, another one being CJ Charleston from Youngstown State at the FCS level. Like, one, I don't think the talent was in the portal maybe that a lot of people expected it to be, but also Michigan wasn't in contention, or hasn't been, for some of the top tier receivers that are in. So is that the positions? Is it D tackle? Is it edge? Where are you seeing that kind of play out?
No, you named it right away. It's the edge. It's maybe a really good defense tackle. It's a left tackle. In a very rare case, it's like an elite wide receiver. But to be honest with you, like I know a bunch of really good wide receivers who are getting like under $300,000 right now. Running back, just like the NFL, is very undervalued in the college game right now. And then the one position group that like is really case by case is like the secondary. Like some teams really like choose to value that really high, and then others don't, and they would prefer to have like a really good line on both sides of the ball.
Gotcha.
Well, we've got, we're coming up here. July 1 is going to be 3 years since kind of the dawn of NIL, the explosion of NIL in the college sports scene. I know revenue sharing is something that seems inevitable. It's more of a matter of when, not if, on that front. In terms of maybe immediate next steps, and then where things are a year from now, 2 years from now, where do you think we're headed with NIL, and what is the next step for college athletics in that front?
Yeah, so everything we all like saw this week and we've been hearing about for months, to be honest, is like everything that stems from this House versus NCAA case. That's like an antitrust lawsuit. And if the NCAA lost, billions would have to be back paid to athletes who didn't have the opportunity to make NIL dollars. So when you hear about all these settlement talks and you hear about revenue sharing, all of this stuff is on the table because of this House versus NCAA case. And I think the one thing I always try to bring up too is like, even if there's a 2% chance that the NCAA could lose in court, they would prefer to settle. Like the consequences would be much bigger if they lost in the courtroom than just try to sit down and settle with the plaintiffs, which is this group of athletes that kind of go by House. House is, I believe, like a swimmer. But beyond that, like, I do think revenue sharing is coming. I think the one thing to keep an eye on here too is for all of this to like come together. Like, there isn't just going to be like revenue sharing on a Wednesday afternoon in like next February. Like, Congress is going to have to step in, or there's going to have to be some sort of a collective bargaining agreement signed. And I mean, collective bargaining, like, it goes on at every professional league in the country. It makes a lot of sense. But on the flip side, the one thing that doesn't make sense is that, right, JJ McCarthy was at Michigan for what, 3 years, if I'm right? Yeah. I mean, like, JJ McCarthy's going to probably go be in the NFL for 10 years. So, like, that's the problem in the college ranks of like just how much turnover there is.
Makes sense. I feel like I need a law degree just following this. You have to cover it at a national level. Are you thinking of, I don't know if you have the time, but are you thinking of going to law school or anything?
I haven't thought about law school. I mean, actually, my younger brother is a first year at law school.
Okay.
I only talk to him on the phone now like once a week because of how busy he is. That sounds like a lot, but I don't know if I'll go to law school. Maybe I will if I don't want to do this anymore, but I love my job, so I don't see it in the cards at the moment.
Yep. No, I'm just joking, but it's crazy the amount of things.
Yeah.
Now it's going to Congress and lawsuits, and it's tough to follow. But Pete, you do a great job covering it. So we asked for 10 minutes of your time.
Can I sneak one more in real quick?
Absolutely.
Pete, give me something on the college football video game. Anything.
Okay.
Ooh.
So Matt Brown from Extra Points does a great job.
Mm-hmm.
I get to cover the transfer portal, so I don't cover EAA as much day to day as he does. I try to, but Matt does a great job. So he reported on the cover athletes, right? There's going to be like, all of them are going to be from Power 4 conferences. I think the big misconception with all that I am happy to clear up for you is that there's not going to be like 4. There's probably going to be like 2 or 3 from my understanding. I also have been told that there's going to be like a couple editions of the game. Now, whether that's like legitimately like different copies of the game, or like maybe they have like you get like 250 like ultimate team points or something like that. I've been told that they're like looking into that for like different cover athletes. So it'll be fun. I mean, I guess the thing I'm most excited for, and I'm sure you guys are for, it's like growing up, you always played and it was cool. But like your favorite quarterback was like number 6, but now like they're going to have a name and stuff. Like, that's what I'm looking forward to. Past that though, I expect them to make an announcement this month about gameplay. And then we're expecting the game to be released in July. I know some dates have been thrown around. I'm really hesitant to say anything until EA says something.
They have to make a couple covers because Ohio State fans aren't going to play a game with Will Johnson on the cover. I'm sure they would, but Michigan fans aren't going to want to play a game with, some Ohio State player, Caleb Downs or something like that on the cover. So
how do we feel about a Georgia player getting on the cover?
Is that a scoop?
That's not a scoop. It's just a tease.
I think people would play it. I think people that are fans would play it, but that makes a lot of sense. Pete, thank you so much for joining us. People can follow Pete at Pete Nakos _. He's On3 Sports Business and Transfer Portal reporter, but so much more. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, guys.